Welcome to Reverend Tashi's Talks, where issues of life and faith are discussed for your edification and application. Thank you for tuning in. I am your guest host, Wayne. In this episode, we continue from the last episode where we started talking about the matter of trust. You will recall that in the last episode we defined trust. We spoke about why trust is such an important matter. We explained what was meant by trust issues. Reverend Tashi told us how we can tell if someone has trust issues. And she explained how persons reach the point where they develop trust issues. In today's episode, we pick up with Reverend Tashi explaining how trauma can cause trust issue.
Hi Wayne, thank you again for guest hosting.
It is my honor and pleasure.
Yeah, so we're back at it again talking about trust issues. Mm-hmm. And where are we picking up this time?
This time,
we're talking about trauma.
Trauma and how it can cause trust issues.
Okay, well, it is a fact that trauma can cause trust issues. And again, I'm going to be giving some information from another source, from one of the sources that I would have consulted. And the information speaks to traumatic life events. And it says that these may cause issues with trust and safety for adults. So the life events can include accident, illness, theft, or damage to personal property, loss of a loved one, being cheated on, or left for another person. So of course, some of those are more obvious than others.
Yeah, I can readily identify what they're being cheated on or left for another person cause.
I'm sure you can. Right. But, being physically violated or attacked can also impact a person's trust in others. Before I get to the physical violation and so on, let's talk about accidents, for example. How do accidents impact, a person's ability to trust? So, for example, if you think about a car accident, whether you are the one driving or you are being driven. So, for example, there are some persons who would have been involved in an accident and then they never want to drive again.
True.
Or they don't think that anyone can drive them. They don't trust anybody to drive them to any far distance, and sometimes even not. And as a matter of fact, there are some persons who don't drive because there is that whole issue of trust with themselves. I might not be able to maneuver someone on the road, doing some kind of illegal overtake or something like that. So the accident can cause trust issues. Sometimes the trust issues is with the self, and sometimes it is with other people because of the trauma of the experience. So that's one example, because they have different types of accidents.
Fine. So tell me, using the same accident example, is there some point where there's an overlap between, say, fear and trust issues?
Definitely. And then we can talk about which one causes the other.
Okay,
so is it the fear that causes the trust issues, or the trust that causes the fear?
Okay.
I want to believe that it's the fear that causes the trust. Because in the case of the accident, the fear comes because of the trauma of that experience. And therefore, because I'm fearful, so if you think about it, I don't trust. Think about a small child playing with dad, big, strong daddy. And dads tend to love to throw children up in the air and catch them back. And a small child who has no reason to believe that daddy won't catch them, there is no fear.
No fear. Yeah.
Because they know that daddy will catch them, and daddy is capable and strong enough, and he's there, and he's not going to let me fall and hurt myself. So there is that childlike kind of trust.
So the absence of fear leads to that, to the trust.
In that particular or similar situations.
Okay.
But then, if for some reason this child has been thrown up in the air before and there was a miss, or something like that, then there is fear. And because there is fear now, I'm not going to jump because you're not going to catch me. You missed me the last time. So the fear leads to that kind of mistrust, to say, no, I'm not putting myself in that again. And we can apply this to different things in life where people are fearful, and because they are fearful, that fear keeps them from trusting other people.
Very true.
with whatever it is that they're doing.
So true.
So that's just an example. So back to the being physically violated or attacked. And how it impacts. Now, the physical violation or physical attack usually happens in many cases of rape or assault. And you can think about, for example, in the military, veterans of military combat may also have difficulty with trust due to stress of stresses of wartime violence. There's also post-traumatic stress disorder, which comes from exposure to severe or perceived danger, and it can lead people to experience great difficulty with trust. So remember, now we're talking about if trauma can cause trust issues.
Right.
So we're talking about different traumatic situations that persons may experience. People may experience and re-experience trauma in their minds. So sometimes when there has been a really stressful event or traumatic event, just because it's playing over and over in the mind, that causes the person to not trust anybody because they're reliving the experience over and over, and it has not been properly dealt with. Anxiety, of course, often accompanies trauma, and people with post-traumatic stress disorder can go to great lengths to create a feeling of safety. And that's where the mistrust comes in. They don't trust people because they think they're better off by themselves, and they deal with that. They may isolate themselves from others or become overly dependent, depending on how they are responding to the traumatic event that they have.
Okay. Alright, so I can readily see, having listened to you, how trauma can contribute to trust issues, right? Okay. What about love? Can there be love without trust? Can somebody who has trust issues fall in love and remain in love and have a successful love life?
Successful, that's going to be a challenge because love needs trust. But how I respond to that question about can there be love without trust, my response is that a lack of trust violates the proper expression and outworking of love as portrayed by God in the scriptures. So love, properly defined, will not thrive in an environment when there is no trust.
Okay.
Love, properly defined, will not thrive. So I think that the greatest potential of love will not be realized if there are trust issues. Yes.
Okay. So your advice to people with trust issues who are desirous of falling in love would be?
You need to deal with your trust issues. Simple. Deal with your trust issues. it's good for people who are unmarried, single, whatever the case is, and you hope for love in the future and that kind of thing. It is important now as a single person, because singleness is a gift from God. It's not a curse, people. But it's important now, and as a matter of fact, whether single or married, it is important to identify if you have trust issues and to deal with them. No, because this will help in you being able to fully express, as far as that goes, the kind of love that will express commitment, sensitivity, respect, and just joy, just being in a relationship where you feel there's a safe haven, someone with whom you can be yourself around and not worry about losing that friendship or that connection or that kind of thing. So it's a great feeling to know that there is someone, at least one person that you can trust. But before you get there, you have to deal with your own personal trust issues.
Okay. Somebody who has been in love, was married, and it fell apart, and she was betrayed, or he was betrayed in love. Don't you see that that person could easily develop trust issues when it comes on to future relationships and future love relationships?
That's true. Yeah. And in many cases, that's really what happens. They develop trust issues due to what has happened, especially if they, within the relationship or the reason for the marriage to have dissolved would have been for extramarital affairs or adultery, as the Bible calls it. And that is why it is important for persons to seek the necessary help that they need to heal from the hurt of that situation, and to also identify what role you played in the marriage breakdown and what role the other person played, and then coming to the realization that you have no control over another person's behavior. So if a person cheated on you, you have no control over them cheating on you. That's them. But then within the broader context of the relationship, of the marriage that existed, what's the role that you played? So I encourage persons to self-reflect, to introspect, because, as I've always said, and I think I heard this from Gary Chapman, to talk about, when a relationship goes awry, even if you only contributed 5%, you have to take responsibility for your 5%, even if the other person is 95%. And so all of that will come into play with dealing with, and it is important to deal with it, because then you will take these experiences from the previous relationship and bring it into another relationship, and the same thing may happen, because as we know that the rate of divorce increases with the number of marriages that a person has. So if within a first marriage, the divorce rate is about 50% thereabout. In a second marriage, the divorce rate is about 70-something%.
Really?
And in a third marriage, it is even higher.
Wow.
Okay, so I think that there is something that we need to pay attention to, not to repeat cycles, and to understand that it is not God's intention for us to live with trust issues that are so bad that they affect our relationships in a negative way. It is not God's intention for us to live with just this great suspicion and so on. So when we have these life experiences, whether trauma or disappointment or being hurt or violated or attacked, whatever it is, there is help available, and we should seek out that help to get things into perspective and to move forward in a healthy way.
And you may have unwittingly answered my next question, because it is, what advice do you have for people who are not living their best life? They're not living their best life now because they are plagued with trust issues.
Right. Advice, and that's a very good question, and I would have said some of that now, so I'll try to go through again, being more specific about that. So again, if you are listening, if you have trust issues, it's good to identify the causes, the source of your trust issues, whether these trust issues are stemming from your childhood experiences and interactions, or maybe from, as an adult, repeated violation of your expectations, or whatever it is. It's important to highlight, to find out the source, because when you know the source, you are better able to treat with the symptoms, so to speak. It is also important to know how your trust issues play out in your life. So that's the symptoms there. So for example, if you find that you're overly suspicious of people, you don't believe anything that persons tell you, if you keep people at bay, most of your relationships are superficial, you don't get close to others, you have no friends, whatever it is, things like that. If you know how your trust issues play out in your life, that is also important for you to know, because then you will be able to say, yes, I have some trust issues that I need to deal with. I have trust issues that are affecting my relationship. There are some persons who are very suspicious. They're married and very suspicious of their spouse. For whatever reason, and maybe your trust has been violated before, but then there is hope for a married couple who has had issues of trust within the relationship. They need to now be very deliberate about building that trust. And if it took years to get to where you are now, building the trust is not going to be overnight. It's going to take some time. So they have to sit down and say, look, I have violated. We have violated. We want this marriage to be healthy. We want this marriage to thrive. We want to stay together. What do we need to do now? How are we going to? And I beg for your forgiveness for how I violated the trust in this relationship by this, that I did. So it calls for openness and honesty and being deliberate about building that trust back. So that's important. Just putting in a little word there for those who are married and there may be trust issues there. So after we have identified the symptoms, identified the source, the next thing is for us to understand that trust is earned. So begin by being trustworthy yourself. There are so many persons who sit on the outside and look on and think, I can't trust that person. That person is so this, so that. But then I am saying, look within yourself. Can people trust you? That is important to understand. Can people trust you? So you must first be trustworthy yourself. Is there anything about you that would make people not want to trust you or have reason to not trust you? Deal with that. You must first be found trustworthy. So if you know that nobody can tell you anything in confidence because you just have to tell some other people, deal with that, because people can't trust you. So you can't expect to violate other people's trust, but then you are so concerned that, you can't get anybody to trust you.
But not only that, if you're not trustworthy yourself, sometimes we believe that every person behaves the same way. So because I'm not trustworthy, I just assume that everybody else is not trustworthy either.
That is a great point. And it goes that point, it applies in other areas as well. So you remember, I think in the previous episode when I said that there are women who actually believe that every man must cheat.
Right, yeah.
That has been their experience with every relationship they have had. So they think that this is normal. So they portray that onto people. Right. So some of these are signs too of a person's experience. So if somebody says, I can't trust anybody and so on, then, don't look too far, because chances are you are that way. So that's a very important point. So flip the script. Choose not to paint the future with the negative experiences of the past. So how about beginning at the place of trust with your children? Speaking to parents now, begin at the place of trust with your children, begin at the place of trust with your friends, begin at the place of trust with your family. So for example, there are some parents who are parents of teenagers, and because when they were teenagers they couldn't be trusted. Yeah. They violated every rule in the book where their parents were concerned. Or maybe they didn't, but their parents didn't trust them. Yeah. Now that your children are teenagers, you just don't trust your child. And you have no reason to not trust your child other than the fact that they're teenagers and you think all teenagers are going to do this and that and so on. No, that's unhealthy. That does not help. If we're going to build trust in our children, we must begin at the place of trust. And by how do we do that? We communicate our expectations to them. And you know, we say something like, my expectations of you are the highest. So you're going out to the mall with your friends now. I expect you to be home by 9 p.m., by 10 p.m., whatever that time is that the parent wants to set. And then you give the child that trust. Don't call them every minute, you're not coming home, what is going on out there? See if they will come home at 10. When they come home at 10, or whatever the time you set, then you commend them for acting responsibly and for honoring the time that we agreed to. And for, you know, you have met my expectations. No matter if they come home earlier, you've exceeded my expectations. I'm so proud of you. And then you start to talk like, so how was your trip? You know, have that conversation. But don't begin to, for example, if your child comes home late from school, don't assume that they came home late from school because they went to somebody's house and they were doing all manner of evil. Just talk, have a conversation. You know, what's going on here? If it's repeatedly happening and you need to do some fact checking, well, fine. But the point is, begin at the place of trust with your child and with your other relationships. So if they violate your trust now, so when you begin at the place of trust, if they violate your trust, then you deal with that specific instance in that moment. As I said before, communicate your expectations and your trust, and then play your part in the relationship. You do not have to write off a person totally for one act of trust violation. It's easier said than done, I know, but if you're in a relationship where trust is repeatedly violated, then you or the other person or both of you should seek professional help. Healthy boundaries are important in a relationship, and they help to establish trust. Okay? And then finally, I want to say on this matter of, you know, giving advice to persons who may be plagued with trust issues and they're just not enjoying life. And this is from the Depression Alliance staff. 2 points. They say acknowledge and learn from the past. Okay. And then the next one here, well, I'll give that one. Acknowledge and learn from the past. So they say if you have experienced breaches of trust in the past, acknowledge it. It is very similar to the grieving process. You need to go through the stages of acknowledging what has happened, then accepting and finding ways to move forward in a different way than before. It has happened, but it does not mean it is going to happen again. I want to say that again. It has happened, but it does not mean it is going to happen again. You may be repeating patterns if you always get hurt with the same types of people or situations. Reflect on these patterns of trust issues in relationships and learn from them. So in other words, as I was mentioning, being self-reflective, right, it is important for us to determine what was my role in the context of this relationship, why it didn't work out. Right. Because going into another relationship, if you didn't deal with your part of it, you're repeating the same pattern, and your relationships are just not working out, and you're wondering, and then you're writing people off, and you're developing more trust issues. Right. And you're wondering what's going on. But self-reflect. It is important to do that. Learning how to trust, to what degree, and who to trust are important in this life. I am not saying that we should go around trusting everyone. I'm not saying that at all. However, trust is at the foundation of developing meaningful relationships in this life. And for the meaningful relationships we have, a lack of trust will violate or interfere with the growth and maturity of such a relationship. Is it any wonder that the scripture says, "Trust in the Lord with all of thine heart, and lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path." Finally, I want to say, trust is at the core of just about any type of relationship we have in life. Learning to manage how you place trust in yourself and others is a fundamental part of being a human being. If you think you have developed some trust issues over your journey through life, take the time to reflect on how you can let them go and learn to become trusting again. When it comes to trust issues, God can help you to heal.
Amen. So listeners, there you have it. Reverend Tashi's talk on trust. And trust me, you can trust her. You have just listened to Reverend Tashi's talks. To hear more from Reverend Tashi, go ahead and download the Podbean app. Then follow the Reverend TC Views podcast. You may also subscribe to Reverend Tashi's YouTube channel. Search for Tashi Campbell on the YouTube platform. If you have been empowered by this talk, click subscribe, then hit the notification bell so you will never miss an episode. Every blessing to you.